Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast, powered by the Snowbird US Day Tracker app. I'm your host, Gerry Scott, and my goal is to give you answers to your cross-border questions, to ease the stress of a cross-border move or extended trip, and to keep you up to date on all you need to know with cross-border rules and regulations. Now let's get on with the show. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Snowbird Expat Radio Podcast. Today, we're doing the first of three shows, which we're going to be talking about that terrible T word, which is called tariffs. And we're fortunate to have Dan Kiselbach here from Miller Thomson in Vancouver. So Dan, welcome to might be one of the largest, most listened to shows in Canada right now. But tell us more about yourself and your firm, and then we'll get into the questions on these tariffs, which everybody is very curious and fearful.
Well, thanks for having me on, Gerry. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about tariffs, and it's been a focus of mine for the last little while. I practice in the area of global trade and customs, and I've been doing this for over 30 years. It's been a kind of a quiet, settled atmosphere during the era of globalization, and all of a sudden, boom. As a result of the first Trump administration, things got shaken up, and now in the second Trump administration we're on, I would call it hyperdrive. So it's been kind of an interesting time to experience such an acceleration at the end of my career.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, growing up in a little small town on the west coast of Vancouver Island, little town like Ucluelet, we've been hearing about tariffs since the 1980s. And it so happens we are going to have Mike Harcourt on the podcast in a couple of weeks. And Mike had to deal with all the dispute in the lumber industry. And the first time we did hear that word tariffs back in the early 80s. So tell you what, let's jump into these questions here. Let's jump into the questions.
All right. It's going to be a law school exam, maybe.
Oh, well, I'm sure you're the guy, 30 years of experience. I got the easy job. I just have to ask the questions and listen to the answers. So here's question number one, Dan. How will U.S. tariffs affect the cost of goods imported from Canada and vice versa, of goods imported from Canada and vice versa?
Yeah, sure. So I'll pick an industry that I know a little bit about, which is the beer industry. You ship from Canada aluminum, raw aluminum, into the United States. Now it's subject to 25% duty. And then we don't really make the containers to hold beer. It used to be in glass, but now it's in aluminum containers. So the U.S. suppliers ship those containers, those sheets, into Canada. And that is also subject to 25% surtax. So you're getting a double whammy. And that's the difficulty, is that the tariffs, U.S. tariffs, beget retaliatory measures. And both, the raw materials and the finished good are now subject to increased costs. So everything goes up.
Now, so really, at the end of the day, the guy who's drinking the beer is going to bear the cost of those tariffs.
Yeah, because it's going to be passed on. There's not a lot of industries that can withstand a 25% hike, or, it's not exactly 50%, but it's going to be something that's increased over 25% in terms of the cost to produce and supply a can, a sleeve. And so that the end user is going to end up paying increased costs. So the Canadian consumer, in this case, is going to end up bearing the freight also.
Now, I'm sure that we can ask this question after every question that we ask you now, but it sure sounds like a tax to me. It's the end user that has to pay every time.
Yeah. I mean, when you take another example, grocery store margin is about 2%. Very slim margins. And so when you tack on a 25% surtax on orange juice or whatever, it takes the whole profit out of the business, and you're ending up either you're going to have to increase that price by 25% or you're not going to supply it.
Well, it's amazing how our American friends believe that this is a tariff and this is going to help them pay down their deficit, get the foreigners to pay down their deficit, but at the end of the day, it is a tax.
Well, exactly, and I think that there were estimates that it was going to generate something like $6 trillion in the U.S. economy over 10 years, and the current indicators are that it's going to fall far short of that now. The concept was that tariffs would, bringing in U.S. tariffs might help the U.S. drop the income tax rates down. But tariffs will never accomplish that goal of substituting for income.
I know there was a talk that they would, they want to bring all these jobs, these manufacturing jobs back to United States from overseas. But that's going to take 20 years to bring those jobs back, and it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of money, and you're going to need foreign partners to help you with these manufacturing plants in the United States. And who is the Americans going to partner with? Here's the next question here. Could new tariffs disrupt Canadian retirees who own U.S. property and rely on cross-border services?
Well, of course, I think that anything that's going to be a good, first of all, is it's going to be disruptive to snowbirds that are going into the United States, for example, and they have a recreational property and they want to maybe do a little renovation, or they've got some things that they need. It's going to impact their ability to do that by causing inflation, causing increased costs. And it's not just the goods that are imported that will be hiked up in costs. The protected industry, say you're bringing in softwood lumber or whatever, and it's subject to a higher rate of duty. Well, the domestic producers, they don't keep their costs down. They also bring their costs up to match the increased costs of the foreign suppliers. So everything goes up. Those are the studies. That's what they indicate.
Well, in preparation for a podcast we have coming up with Steve Flynn from Anderson, I was reading this article the other day about properties in Arizona. A year ago, there was 100 properties for sale by Canadians. This time, there is 700 Canadian properties for sale in the Arizona area, in the state of Arizona, which I believe Canadians are getting nervous and worried about everything, how Americans might treat them, or how they, the more that Canada tries to resist and retaliates. There's a lot of people believe that Canadians could be the bad people here and have been stealing from the Americans for years. Now, I'm fortunate to be spending a lot of time in a state like Hawaii, and there's a lot of love on that island for Canadians. So I'm hoping I'm in good shape. So here's another question that could tariffs lead to retaliation from Canada, and that could escalate in border trade in an outright war on trade?
Well, I think we're seeing some of that now. It has to be a measured response. Put it this way, if 30% of the Canadian economy is U.S., we sell so much to the United States, it accounts for 30% of our economy. For the U.S., Canada accounts for 3%. So we can put in retaliatory measures, but it's not going to have the same impact, right? And so the response that the Canadian government has taken so far is to target Republican districts and states so that the maximum amount of impact is going to be felt without hurting our own domestic economy and our own Canadian consumers and end users.
Now, we'll shift the gears a little bit here. We have an election coming up on April the 28th, and I've leaned on everybody. It may be Mike Harcourt for his opinion, who's almost like a father figure to me. We might not agree on everything, including politics, but other folks that are involved in the pension industry and pension lawyers. And what do you think is going to happen? Any predictions? Conservative, liberal?
I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to know for sure what's going to happen and unfold over the next few weeks. But the trend seems to be towards a liberal government, and the thinking is that behind that, I guess, is that someone that's had experience running, banks and has experience with the levers of power is going to be best equipped to deal with a very, fickle U.S. Trump administration. So that seems to be the picture that is unfolding before my eyes.
Well, I think that's been the opinion I've gotten from everybody is arguably out here in the West, we are conservatives, but sadly, maybe Mark Carney would be the best person for the job. So it sure seems like the polls out there right now, they have the Liberals getting about 197 seats. So it's going to be very interesting. Okay, so we'll try and stay away from politics because we know those are the things you don't talk about at the dinner table.
That's right.
And we'll call this the dinner table today. This is another question related to snowbirds that's on their mind that have properties in the United States. What legal protection do Canadians have for U.S.-based assets during trade disputes?
Well, I mean, under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement and previously under NAFTA, if you're an investor, you have certain rights to be treated in a non-discriminatory way, in a way that domestic investors would be treated. But, if you're a person that's just there to buy a recreational property and so forth, I could imagine a possible world, not saying that this is happening at all right now, but there might be restrictions on foreign ownership or dealing with, property rights, maybe increased taxes. We've done that here in BC, right? It's happened. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that could happen in the United States.
Well, that's it's a very interesting time because I know our friends in Maui that have their homes, we are seeing them sell. We are seeing them being worried. And of course, Maui has its own set of problems of eliminating about 7,000 short-term rentals out of the market to take care of affordable housing for the Hawaiian people. So somewhere in between is going to have to be is a solution that's going to have to be found. Is there a risk of currency instability on a weaker loonie due to trade tensions? And how could this impact spending power in the U.S.?
Yeah, I guess it's like get your Ouija board out and try to figure out what's going to happen over the next little while. The genie is out of the bottle in terms of tariff uncertainty, and we really don't know how that's all going to impact everything. Right now, I understand the Bank of Canada has stayed stable on rates, and and the bank itself is unable to forecast what's going to happen here. It could be a mild kind of slowdown if the tariffs are only temporary, or it could be a recession if they stay on for any length of time. That's the indicators from the Bank of Canada right now.
Yeah, and of course that was echoed today in the announcement of rates not going anywhere. And if anybody's listening to this podcast, it is April 20. Well, I shouldn't say if they're listening. We know everybody's listening, but it is April 16th today, and the Bank of Canada kept rates steady at 2.75, and with the anticipation that let's see what tariffs, what impact they're going to have before they get too antsy out there. How might tariffs impact cross-border investment opportunities or taxation?
Well, the thinking was in the United States is that tariffs would be, a revenue raiser, and all of a sudden we're going to get the U.S. is going to get a lot of money here. That's just not over the last while, at least being borne out by the amount of money that was collected by CBP, the Customs and Border Protection. There is a thinking that the Trump administration's next play is to try to drop corporate and personal income tax. And so you might see that. Canada is going to have to try to be competitive because we're in competition with the U.S. for investment and bilateral trade and services and so forth. So we're going to have to keep a watchful eye on what goes on in the United States to make sure that our economy is as competitive as it can be in circumstances.
Do you think that this was a well thought out plan on the administration, or do you think they're just, it sure seems like they had to backtrack. And I think there was warning signs out there with the bond market, the treasury market, all these hedge funds. There was concerns around them. Do you think it was a well thought out plan that we're going to hit you with tariffs?
Well, like the last time that we had an experience like this was about a century ago with what they call the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. And that experiment coincided with the Great Depression. So it was something that made the Depression great. And I don't think that that's something that many economists encouraged. There was one person, Robert Lighthizer, who indicated that he thought it was a great idea. And President Trump decided that he was the right guy and he was going to be the right person to be the tip of the spear for the tariff idea. I think President Trump has always had an affinity to tariffs and believed that tariffs were the way to go. No doubt there are problems within the way that globalization occurred. An expansion of globalization and the reduction of tariff walls left people behind. And some people lost their jobs. Some sectors didn't do well. There was a hollowing out of the economy in the Midwest, especially in the auto industry. But the answer, many folks feel, is not tariffs. The tariffs is not going to help things. And what it does is just create too much uncertainty, so everything goes on pause. No one's going to go and invest a huge amount of money in a location without having some level of certainty that things are going to be stable. So tariffs are really the enemy of investment.
Well, it sure seems like a lot of the information that we're getting out there with our colleagues out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and in Toronto, is that nobody can figure this thing out. I mean, this is difficult on so many people, and maybe the threat of how many trillions or billions or whatever it is of market cap that's been lost from the market. I know they're trying to backtrack, but it's very interesting.
Well, don't watch your portfolio; it'll just annoy you. So just
Well, I'm a very sound investor in the sense that I believe that I invest for 3 to 5 years out from now, maybe 4 to 6 years out from now. So equities are just there to protect me against inflation. If I'm planning to buy a helicopter or a boat or a train or whatever, those monies are allocated for short term. So I think I've been very disciplined, not only with myself but with our clients. So be careful. Now, here's something that we're going to be doing a podcast on with an immigration lawyer coming up, and there's been a lot of changes, and I think they were implemented on April the 11th. They came up with this new, it's called the USCIS, where individuals are now going to have to file. If you're not getting your I-94, you're going to have to file, and Trump is claiming, and I'll say the administration, I'll use the term the current administration so I don't come across as being, my opinions being too loud. They're making it more and more difficult politically for Canadians to come down south and spend 30 days or more. And we're getting so many calls on this through our app, the Snowbird US Day Tracker. What do you think? Could they ever use that? Could they use that to their favor with all these Canadians heading south?
Well, it's data that I think the Trump administration wants to keep, so that they have a record of who's in the country. And immigration, as you well know, in the United States is a huge issue. A lot of issues around, illegal immigration and the inability of the U.S. government to cope with it and deal with it. And there's been a crackdown in immigration, and the Canadians have not been exempted from that. So what's a real bother, I think, for many folks is it's very confusing as to when and whether and how you register. And so much so that advocacy groups have sued the Trump administration over this thing to try to challenge it and see if they can get it rolled back, at least partially, because it is confusing. And many Canadians find it actually offensive that they have to register if they're in the country for 30 days. And so it's not a lot of understanding as to the reasons why this has happened. Okay.
No, I know there's associations out there called the Canadian Snowbird Association, and they've been lobbying for so many things. Can you see those groups and people getting behind organizations like the Canadian Snowbird Association? Do they really have a big voice out there, or does it just take years and years and years? I know the answer, by the way, but I would ask it.
Yeah. Well, I started my life as a litigator, and one thing I know is there's 101 reasons why something is wrong, and you can drag your way through the court system. So it may have some initial appeal to take a shot at the U.S. government, but the U.S. government has quite a few levers to drag the judge. So
Now, there was a talk that a lot of these Canadian corporations, to avoid duties, and I think we discussed this a couple of weeks ago. You and I both sat on a panel, but there was a discussion that these Canadian corporations could head down to the States, maybe exit Canada and do business in the States, because maybe that's where a lot of their customers are. Are you seeing that trend, or is it just too early to determine?
well, there's two schools of thought. One is, let's just hit the pause button and just see if this is going to be a long-lasting thing. But for another school, those folks may have already got some reason to be in the United States. Maybe they've got a distribution hub. Maybe there's some operation there. And this is just a tipping point where they want to say, hey, I don't want to have to deal with that border thing. And I want to find a way of de-risking my business so that I can make sure that I have access to the U.S. market. And our team is working on a couple different projects right now where we're moving some of the business into the United States. There's, a number of different issues that have to be dealt with. Canadian and U.S. tax, Canadian and U.S. customs. You have to, maybe incorporate something and find the right place to incorporate it and register your company. And then there's the immigration issues that have to be dealt with. So you have to have the right team put together so that you can do this efficiently and get it done. And it's not an amateur hour type of thing. Not somebody wants with the doer.
So when you're working on processes like that and the transition for businesses, do you have a legal team in the States as well that's kind of giving you guidance, and you're representing the Canadian, and so it's kind of happening across the borders at the same time?
Yeah. So I like, basically my job right now is to be the project manager and make sure that the team is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Get U.S. and Canadian customs on side. What's the value of goods going into the United States? Getting U.S. and Canadian tax. Finding out what the consequences of the business are in terms of their tax, the income tax, and how to repatriate those profits tax efficiently back to Canada. That's a big deal. And then you also probably need to have somebody that will know how to transfer price, that we can give you from an economic standpoint a benchmark so that you know that you can rely upon the prices that you are setting for valuation in the United States. So there's a bit to it, and we work with a couple of different U.S. firms that have done this before and work with us well, and so we can get these things across the finish line with the least amount of fuss.
So here's a question for you. Why is it that so many businesses incorporate in Delaware?
Oh, well, Delaware has kind of marketed itself. It's a marketing thing. They've got judges that really know about the corporate world, and they cater to the corporate community, and it's an efficient place to do business. It is also tax favorable, and that it just seems to be the magnet for many U.S. corporations to get incorporated. And then you can register. Say we have one right now where we're thinking about having it registered to carry on business in Indiana, right? So that's generally the way to go. Where there's different types of corporations and different places you can register, and but that seems to be the far and away the preferred place to incorporate.
So you would basically incorporate in Delaware, and then you would just have permission to work and operate your business in other states. You don't necessarily have to be incorporated in the state of Hawaii, but just permission to do business in that state.
Yeah. So you register where you're going to carry on business. We have one right now where they have a distribution hub. They're going to be exporting or importing into the United States $100 million worth of goods, and they're going to register in Indiana to do their distribution hub.
So when this is all over, said and done, where is the common ground between, it's not just Canada, United States, it's United States and the rest of the world. Where is the common ground?
Well, I mean, common ground. I think what we've done is we've blown up the world order that existed for the last 80 years, since the Bretton Woods Accord, post-World War II. And now we're going to reset. And I think what I envision now is more of a Fortress North America approach. There may be an Asian trade bloc, a European trade bloc, and a North American trade bloc. Canada may end up being in a more favorable position because it will be one of the few countries, Mexico included, that will have access, if I'm right, under the renegotiated free trade agreement, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement, to provide access into the U.S. market duty-free for goods that fall into the free trade agreement. So we're already seeing companies say they're supplying out of Vietnam. They're going to be hit with 40% reciprocal duty. They might want to import the inputs for, say, a furniture or a finished good, have that furniture built in Canada and then exported into the United States. We have a free trade agreement with many countries in the Indo-Pacific. They can get their inputs into Canada duty-free. If they manufacture in Canada, they can export it into the United States duty-free.
Now, at the end of the day, does Congress have the ability to, I know at one time Congress did have control of the tariffs, and I think if they take it, I think there's an agreement out there called IEESA, IEESA, that he's trying to follow under protection of the country. Does Congress have the ability to block these tariffs? The vote?
Well, what happened was that the U.S. Congress delegated this authority under different pieces of legislation. And so in order to pull it back, they're going to have to amend the legislation, right? And that right now could be an extraordinarily difficult undertaking. So I think there's at least 4 or 5 Republicans that want to do that. But you're going to have to get more support to amend legislation and pull back the presidential authority. It was thought that the president would be able to reflect the will of Congress, I should say, and should be in a position to quickly impose tariffs in the case of an emergency, in case when it was absolutely critical to do so. No one, I think, really thought that tariffs would be used on this scale by a U.S. president without really involving Congress.
Well, I'll tell you, Dan, I find it's a very trying time in your industry, in our industry. Snowbirds are worried. So any information that you've been able to provide with us today is very, very helpful. And we have a chance to introduce Dan to all the snowbirds across Canada that are looking to do business in the United States. So I appreciate your time, and I look forward to having lunch with you downtown in Vancouver. It's a long haul from Coquitlam out here, and hopefully that road is still open and I don't have to go through the United States to get to you. But I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Snowbird Expat Radio Podcast. The best way you can support the podcast is to forward the episode to a friend, and please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Now, before you go, let me leave you with one of my favorite quotes. Be kind to all, the world is small.